there! Happy Wednesday and welcome to this Facebook Live all about 3 keys to teach your child to read and love reading at the same time. I am so excited to be here with you today to talk about this topic because I think it's one that's super important. I think it's so easy to get really focused on either teaching our child to read and really feeling like we need to have all of those pieces in place, or on developing a love of reading with our kids and making sure that no matter what we're doing, that they are really loving reading. But it can be hard for our kids to have both pieces, because when we're really focused on teaching our kids to read, often that love of reading and that desire to want to read can get sucked away. And especially if we aren't following a specific method, or if our kids are struggling as readers, that can be so difficult to keep them motivated and to keep them excited about reading throughout the learn to read process. But then the flip side is also true. If we're only focused on making sure that our kids love books and they're having a positive experience, it can sometimes be hard to get all of the necessary steps in to teach them how to read. And so today I want to talk about how we can really do both, and about how we can raise kids who are not only strong, confident readers, but also who love books. And so I'm really excited to just talk about the balance between the two and about how we can do both today. So I want to jump right in and I want to talk about the 3 keys that you need to teach your child to not only read, but also love reading at the same time. So I want to jump right in and just share the 3 keys right off the bat. We're not going to pull any punches here today. And then I want to talk about why each of them is important and how they work together in combination. So I made this little graph or chart because I know I always really like these kind of things to help us be able to see what's happening. And so these are, I think, the 3 most important parts of teaching a child how to read and making reading really fun. So we have lessons, we have stories, and we have community. And I want to talk a little bit about what I mean by each of these pieces and why they are important. So the first piece up here at the top is lessons. So in that piece, I'm referring to short science-backed lessons that teach our kids how to read. So we want to make sure that we're following the best practices of what the research is showing about how kids learn how to read and how that process works in their brains. And so there are very specific ways to structure the lessons to really make them the most effective for our kids. And we'll talk more about that for sure. Stories. I'm talking specifically about side-by-side reading stories. So stories that you and your child can read together, that you can share together, so that they have not only the experience of reading to you, but also the experience of you listening to them. And then the final piece over here is community. And in that piece, I'm talking about you having community with other parents and also having community with to be able to ask questions and get support along the reading journey. Because the reality is that every child's reading journey looks a little bit different, and so you need to have somewhere that you can turn if you get stuck, or if you need help, or if you have a question. So those are the 3 pieces that I think are super important: lessons, stories, and community. And I want to kind of break down what each of those looks like and why you need them. So within the Reading Better Together system of lessons, stories, and community, there are 2 really main parts that we start out with, and those are the lessons and the stories. Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for being here. All right, so lessons and stories are kind of our main focus of the curriculum itself. And those are super important because when you have both the lessons and the stories, your kid starts to get the confidence back. So a lot of times when parents are teaching their kids how to read, they will be saying something like their kid feels like they can't do it, or maybe they're giving up before they even started. You can let me know in the comments if you have heard this. I got a chance to talk to somebody by email this week who was sharing that her child just doesn't want to read. And it's not that they can't read, it's that before they even get to the lesson, even if they would be able to do it, they've given up before they've even tried. And they have that discouragement or that frustration that they remember from past experiences that is now preventing them from even wanting to try to practice this time. And so when we combine really, really effective lessons that are teaching our kids the skills they need to know, plus the stories that give them a really positive experience and success with reading very quickly and in the short term, that gives our kids the confidence back to be able to say, yes, I can do it. I can read this. And that is really important. It makes it so that our kids are willing to try, and it ends those reading fights that we have. And that's super important when we're teaching, because we need our child to be willing to try in order to be able to teach them something. And we know that when our kids are engaged and interested in the lesson, they're going to be more open to hear what we have to say, and they're more likely to learn. It also really helps to improve our relationship with our kids, because if we aren't having those daily fights over, are you going to read or aren't you going to read? Can you have 10 more minutes on your tablet before we have to practice? I don't want to do reading. Well, you have to do reading. Why do I have to do reading? And all of those things, when those fights start to go away, that will help us to be able to have a better relationship with our child. We're not doing all the nagging and the whining and the complaining and the arguing and all of that cycle that can happen. And instead, we're able to bond with our kids over that love of books and over those experiences that we're having reading those stories together. So that is a really powerful thing that parents will talk about when they get started with reading better together, and something that is really, really special and unique. But the problem is that you also need this community piece too, because if you don't have the community, all of the things with the lessons and the stories will work really well for a little while until your child gets stuck. So the reality is that the reading journey looks a little bit different for every single child, and different kids will get stuck at different places, or they'll need a little bit of extra help in different spots. Some of the common spots that kids get stuck are when they're transitioning from the alphabet to the words, from the letters to the words. When they first are figuring out that process of blending, that's really difficult for a lot of kids and for a lot of parents. So figuring out how to navigate the transition between my child knows all the letter sounds and my child can take that knowledge and actually blend those sounds to make words. That transition can be really tricky, and that's often a spot where kids need a little bit of extra help and a little bit of extra lessons. Another spot that's really tricky for a lot of kids is when they're trying to figure out what to do with those words that don't follow the rules. So they know how to sound out your basic words, but then when it comes to the ones that are confusing or the ones that don't follow the rules, they get stuck and frustrated and they give up. You can let me know in the comments if your kids have struggled at either of those spots, or maybe that's where you are now. And if that's the case, then it's really important to have a community where you can come and you can get help when your child gets stuck. You can spend hours Googling these things. You can sometimes find answers on YouTube, but it can be really helpful to have somebody to go to and just say, here's exactly what's happening with my child, and get that specific targeted advice. A lot of times when we have a good curriculum but we don't have a good community, that's when we can get really frustrated and when we can tend to give up on it, and it becomes just another thing that gets added to the pile of things that didn't work for us, or we can cause a lot of discouragement and frustration for our child because we continue to try the same things over and over again, and it just isn't working, and it isn't clicking, and it still isn't working, and it still isn't clicking. And then a lot of times our child will start to take that on themselves and start to get frustrated with themselves and say, this isn't working for me, I must not be a very good reader, or I can't do it. And then they start to go down that discouragement cycle again. So having a good community is really important. It reminds me of when my mom was learning how to knit. So my mom is a fantastic knitter. She loves to make all sorts of different things. She is super talented. She just knitted a dress for my daughter and then a matching dress for my daughter's doll. So she's got some skills. But when she was first starting out, she taught herself basically everything about knitting. And she started out with some books and some things, and it worked well for a while. And then she got to a point where she got really stuck. There was a skill that she just could not figure out how to do. And she Googled it, and she watched also all sorts of videos, and she had this video thing that she was doing, and she read books and she looked at pictures, and she couldn't figure it out, and it was frustrating. And so finally she went to a local yarn store in our town, and she ended up finding somebody who knew how to do this thing, who sat down with her and watched her do it and gave her some specific suggestions to her. And in just a few minutes, in that one day, she was able to figure out what was wrong and able to continue on. So a lot of times that really targeted advice from somebody in your community, somebody that can come and support you on this process, is really, really important. And that's something that's missing from a lot of reading curriculum. So when you buy your reading curriculum off of Amazon, that is the piece that is missing for a lot of families. And that is why a lot of families will try multiple reading curriculums without success, because the community piece, the support, is missing. And so when you get to that spot where it needs to be customized for your child, if you don't know how to do that, then you're stuck. So that's why the community piece is super important. So we have community, and then we also have stories over here. And the stories are another really important part of the Reading Better Together system, and another really important part of raising a child who not only can read, but also loves reading at the same time. Because when kids have those stories and that community, then they really start to love reading. The stories are really the piece that gives kids that early win and that motivation to read, because they're able to see right away from week 2 that they are somebody who can pick up a book that has a cover and pages and have success with reading it. And so it shows them that what they're working towards in those reading lessons is something that's going to help them really be successful as a reader long term. And so the stories are a super important piece. They also just really give kids the motivation to see that reading lessons are fun as well, because the stories all have a plot, they have exciting characters, they have themes that kids are interested in and excited to read about. And so as they start to see those kinds of things, then they get excited to read those stories. And that is really important, because ultimately that motivation is sort of the gas that drives the car. So they need that motivation to be able to be excited and focused during those reading lessons to be able to get those skills. So the stories are a super important part and a really important part of the system. And the side-by-side reading is important as well, because they get to read with you. You get to build that relationship with your child over that shared experience of reading the book together. Your child also gets a break after each page they read, where they get a little mini reward because they get to sit and listen to you read to them, which often is a really fun and exciting thing for them. So those stories are a really important piece. And when the stories are combined with the community, then you have all of those positive experiences with your child and the help to be able to get the support. But the problem is that the stories really need the lessons to go along with them, because the lessons are really important to make sure that our kids don't get frustrated along the process of learning to read. When we don't have those really powerful lessons, then the motivation that we have from the stories doesn't last. It's sort of like eating an entire meal full of dessert over and over and over again. The stories are like the dessert, and the lessons are like the vegetables. They're the ones that have the nutrients to really help our kids be able to grow and learn and become stronger readers. Because the lessons are where our kids are really building and developing the skills that they need to become capable readers and confident readers over the long term. It's where they're learning how to sound out new words without being taught, and it's where they're learning how to attack a word that they've never seen before. Reading teachers will often call this skill like a reading explosion. So at some point along the process, our kids are going to figure out how to read a word that they have never seen before, and how to apply the things that we've taught them about the words that we've actually practiced to words that they've never seen before. And when that happens, that reading explosion happens, and our kids are able to read all sorts of words that we've never taught them, and they're able to teach themselves the other words that they need to know, or the words that they've never seen before, as they come across them in the books that they're reading. This is when we transition from learning to read to reading to learn, which is really powerful as a homeschool parent, because it frees our kids up to be able to learn and explore and discover new things all on their own without us sitting there and reading everything to them. Should we keep reading to them? Yes, but we don't need to do it for every single thing that our kids are learning anymore. And so this is a really powerful and exciting time for us in our kids' reading journey, and it only happens when we have these lessons combined with the stories. So that piece is really important, specifically for building strong readers. But the problem is that when we do lessons and when we do those lessons with community, so when we do those lessons, we want to make sure that we're giving kids those really positive reading experiences that they have. But when we do them without community, again, we get stuck. So those are the three parts of our reading, our three keys for reading, and the three reasons that kids need in order to not only become strong readers but also love reading at the same time. They need the lessons, they need the stories, and they need the community, all three pieces. And it's really important to have all three. And so that's why in Reading Better Together, they do have all three. We have this short science-backed lessons that give our kids the opportunity to learn the skills that they really need in order to be successful readers long term and to have the motivation. We also have the side-by-side reading stories that really make reading fun, that give kids a quick win and the motivation that they need to be able to continue using the lessons. And then we have the community, the support that helps you when your child gets to those spots where they get stuck, to be able to personalize the curriculum for your child and to give them the exact skills and wording that they need in order to really understand those skills. So those are the three keys in raising a child who loves reading, and you really do need all three. So I'm going to put a link in the comments of this video to where you can grab a sample of the Reading Better Together curriculum. If you are interested, the sample has several of the lessons so that you can see how those work and how they are laid out. And it also has a side-by-side reading story so that you can take a look at that and try out the stories piece as well. And then, of course, the community piece, you are welcome to ask questions here in the Facebook group anytime that you have them, and I'm happy to help you with those. Inside of Reading Better Together, we have a dedicated Facebook group where I go live every week and answer questions and provide additional training and support for parents as well. So if you have any questions about teaching your child to read, or about Reading Better Together, or about any of these three keys to teach your child to read and love reading at the same time, go ahead and leave those in the comments. And otherwise, I will be back again next Wednesday at 3 with another topic here in the Facebook group. Again, if you have ideas or things that you'd like to hear me talk about during these Facebook Lives, go ahead and leave those in the comments as well, and I would love to include some of those things here in the Facebook group. So I hope that everybody has a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you next week. Thank you. Bye. I hope you enjoyed this video, which was recorded live in the Homeschool Reading Community Group. This is a free Facebook group where I share tips and advice about homeschooling and teaching reading. You'll also find community with other homeschool moms like you, plus freebies, giveaways, parties, and more. I would love for you to join us over at the Homeschool Reading Community. Make sure that you check out the link in the description of this video for all the details.